So thank you for taking the time to answer our three questions.
Right.
First of all, you got a call from David Yates that he got Harry Potter and that he wants you to score it. So what was your first initial reaction and what were your first thoughts in this moment?
I was very I was amazed because actually I had wanted to score in the Harry Potter films for ages because I was a fan of the books. And of course, John Williams did the first one, and his orchestrated did the second, and then he did the third. Um, So when this happened, I was very surprised, and the first thing I thought was, oh, I should maybe study John Williams very carefully and learn how to score like John Williams, because I'm an admirer of his anyway. Um, and I did that, and I started trying, and of course I can't write like John Williams. So after a very short amount of time, David and I decided, no, we'd just go with my kind of style, my way of writing, which of course uh, was in a way perhaps simpler, less detailed, um, and from then on we began to try and find our own way of doing this.
So what was your general approach to the films? So how was your workflow? Are you composing? You're a guitarist. Are you composing on the guitar or on piano or without any instruments? And
I use a keyboard into the computer. I tried guitar, MIDI guitar, but this is a long time ago, and it was so slow. I could play keyboard anyway. I mean, for composing. So yes, and then how did we approach those movies? Well, for the first one, of course, being so new and such a big movie, straight out of me just really doing TV stuff.
yeah,
Um, we had to sort of work on trying to find a way to convince Hollywood that it would be all right, and we found quite a lot of music I'd already written for things like Land of the Tiger and BBC series where there's a lot of big orchestra, and then we actually scored a piece using the storyboard of Harry's first arrival at the Ministry of Magic. And we went in specifically into Abbey Road for the first time for me, and um, we recorded it, and then I was on board. So that was the first piece that
so
was done.
was it the entrance into the Ministry of Magic or was it the scene before with Mr. Weasley in the Muggle world leading to
Uh,
the entrance?
it was if I think carefully, probably I, I think I went from where they get in the telephone box and go down.
Ah, all right. Yeah.
Yeah, and then it's all the way through to the great, the statue of Budge.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so that was the big build, and the sort of inspiration, I have to confess, was slightly John Adams music. You may know John Adams. Um, there's quite a bit of that sort of. I love the way his sort of sound. So, yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah. Did you compose any other themes or melodies before spotting the film or before getting the picture lock? Or...
Oh well, we were working all the time through it. So I think I came up with some more ideas to do with how we would treat it. And David actually played some of the music to the actors
Yeah,
like that
like
before they were even filming. We were a year ahead, so the whole thing took a year.
that's
Uh, you
interesting.
know. And so he would send me um, a scene, probably a rough cut scene, and then I would score that. Usually give him quite a few choices, maybe even up to six choices of different ideas, and then he'd come back and he'd say, That's interesting, which probably means it isn't any good. And then we'd have one that began to work, and then, of course, as the scene was edited further, then I would work to re-edit the music to fit the scene. And mostly, well, nearly all the time that just worked. And once we got the one, so the Order of the Phoenix was done sort of bit by bit,
Yeah.
gradually finding our way into it.
Yeah, interesting. That sort of answers the next question about you mentioned on the Composers in a Jukebox podcast that
Yeah.
you've written 14 hours of music for Harry Potter 5 alone. That's just so much.
It's ridiculous. Yes, yes. Well, it was because you think about it, it's sort of almost 2 hours of music, and I probably, did virtually 7 versions of everything, of different ideas, all sorts of stuff, because we really were genuinely finding our way. And it's the way I compose anyway, is I always like to give the director quite a few options of ideas.
Yeah.
Well, I don't write film music anymore, and I'm quite happy not writing it. It's quite a stressful job. I really did enjoy it when I did it, and for 30 years I was doing that sort of work. But I always gave people lots of choice, and I like to be ahead. I always like to be ahead, not scrabbing at the last minute just before the recording session.
And also I think like with in Noctem,
Yeah.
in Harry Potter 6, like the choir is singing the piece. So I guess it had to be recorded before so that the choir
Yes.
knew how to sing it.
Yes, and I think, to be honest, the construction and the way we put together 6 was very different from 5, because 5, as I say, was bit by bit, piece by piece, whereas 6, what happened was in Noctem was pre-recorded, like you say, using Queen's College Choir with Owen Rees conducting, and that was going to be for a scene that never happened. So there was going to be a scene of the choir singing in Noctem near the end of the film. It had to be cut because it slowed down the action too much. So, but we liked it so much that we used the Latin chant part of it all the way through the film. So every time Dumbledore appears, and is with Harry, as he always is in that film, that chant appears in some form or another and gradually develops until you get the really big one when they go to the cave. The interestingly, the first part in Noctem doesn't appear until Dumbledore's found dead in the courtyard, and then it comes on the cello as a theme. But I would say that in Noctem was the DNA of the film. That's what David said as well. It was the thing that stuck it all together somehow.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
So that's very different from the previous film, because actually, I think 6 was very much developed more like a symphony.
Yeah, with more leitmotifs and stuff.
Yeah.
I know that Harry Potter 6 was partially temp tracked with your previous score. For example, the Dumbledore's Army cue ended up staying there.
Yeah.
Was Harry Potter 5 also temp tracked? And if yes, what music was there?
It wasn't.
It wasn't.
I can't remember any temp track in 5.
That's interesting.
Well, it was just as well, because I loathe temp tracks. In fact, I even loathe my own ones because I wanted to write something new. But in the end, of course, when you look back, the temp tracking of those things for number 6 really was good, because it gave a continuity between the two films, and actually using fireworks, for instance, for the Wizard's shop, worked very well. It was a bit sad because everybody really liked the jazz piece.
Yeah, Wizards, Weezes.
This is Mises, which but it was not approved higher up in Hollywood. So fortunately, fireworks worked really well and fitted perfectly. So there you go.
That was also a future question I had about this
Yeah.
piece. So, because you mentioned that it was not approved in the process, I wanted to ask who, what are the persons that have the say in this, the decisions? Of obviously David Yates and the producers.
Yeah, David Yates and the two English producers, but then you also have
For now.
the Hollywood producers out there, and for some reason that decision was made in Hollywood, and so what you should always do in a film is that if that happens and it's sounding pretty firm, you go with it. Because if you start trying to fight these things, then something else gets knocked off or something else. And actually, they really left us alone. It's a curious, that one. We've always wondered because there is jazz in Harry Potter 3 with
Yeah.
was actually, well, there's of course the night
Night
bus,
Bus.
which is probably one of my absolute favorite ever
Yes.
pieces for film and sequences. But yeah, there we are. But having said that, Hollywood really did leave me alone. I had very much free reign, and I was respected, and I got a lovely email from the head man saying that I can't remember what it was written down somewhere, something like my score was sublime or something like that,
Oh,
which is
that's
very
nice.
nice and
Yeah.
really unusual, and I was very chuffed, to be honest. Yeah. So there we are. They didn't want just one piece, but they loved the score. And to be fair, also the piece doesn't. It's not related thematically to anything. But it's good on the CD.
It's
Yeah.
still on the album, so.
Yeah. That's right.
So, how does the spotting session with David Yates look like? Does he already have a clear vision where music should be, how the music should be, or is it more like open for ideas and discussion and more like brainstorming?
Yeah, he has a pretty clear idea, to be fair. I mean, sometimes we put music in where it wasn't needed and it just simply was taken out, which of course is what makes one sad, but actually in the final film you think, yeah, that was right. Um, so yeah, he was pretty decisive, but he would always ask as well. So he didn't just tell me. It would be a discussion, but I think we were so used to working together by then that we sort of knew. And also with the films like that, there's music nearly all the time. So
Yeah.
but yeah. I mean, I would, to be fair, I would say David was very, very strong on spotting and where to put it. Yeah.
You're working with MIDI keyboard, so you're scored in a DAW, I assume. Or are you more the person that writes scores?
No, I used I would record it via MIDI straight onto originally Cubase, and then it had to be Nuendo for the American frame rate at the time, and basically it's Cubase. Um, and I found that was a very quick way of working. And then it's just a matter of transferring that onto Sibelius, which is
Yeah.
what I'd used, and then checking it. If you were very careful with the MIDI and very, very precise and made sure that all the notes were the right length and all that sort of stuff, you didn't get funny clutters. It transferred pretty well to Sibelius, but then of course you had to put all the phrase marks and the dynamics in.
Yeah.
So that was the tricky part and of course I had a team doing that, so I couldn't do that. I used to do that myself. before I was doing such big things. I did all the orchestration as well. But the team did it, led by Alistair King, who also conducted it. Yeah.
Alistair King conducted the fifth movie.
Yep.
And however, I noticed that on Harry Potter 6, you both conducted parts of it. I guess somewhere in the behind the scenes footage, I saw you conducting. So, what were your considerations there, and how's your opinion in general on film composers conducting scoring sessions?
I think it probably depends on your director, really. The advantage of having someone, I could conduct them. I'm not as good a conductor as Alistair, but on the other hand, I knew the music better than anybody. So sometimes, like in a piece of Possession from 5, I conducted because we couldn't get the orchestra to get that kind of depth of feeling. So I went out and somehow the vibrations worked. But no, one of the reasons for not conducting was because for ease of process, it was easier for me to be in the control room with David Yates next to me, and like I could pick up how he was feeling about a take, much easier than if you're out on the stage and you're getting oh, can you just do that again because it's a bit and then you get something that is not necessarily sorry about that noise. It's my duck. So yeah, I mean, it can be very difficult for a director to explain to a composer or musicians exactly what's missing or what needs doing. Whereas if you're in the same room, you can communicate so much more easily. So most of the time, I was in the control room. I did conduct a few cues. I mean, the one I remember conducting was Possession, and it worked very well. I did actually work the other way around once with Alistair King. There was a little movie for TV called Enid, which I loved doing, and it was very simple. And we had 20 strings in Abbey Road 1, and I was playing ivory piano, computer piano on it. And I conducted that, and Alistair sat next to the director and passed things on. And that worked really well, actually. I really enjoyed it. But I think in the case of me and David, because there was such a long-term relationship, it was easier if I was with him.
All right. So what was overall both films the easiest cue to work on, and what was the hardest, and why?
Right. Well, there's quite a few. I'm trying to think what's an easy one. But I must admit, I think the one that got there one of the fastest was Umbridge. Because I sort of hit it. I did I think about 6 versions of completely different ideas for David. And the number 6 was the one I thought, well, that's stop the duck. I thought number 6 version was kind of completely off the wall and naughty, but I thought, well, I'll bug it down anyway. And of course, he loved it because it was very much just kind of odd, but actually that virtually, just remained. And of course, it had to be reworked and re-edited. That took time. It was tricky from that point of view, but the actual theme remained. And of course, another one you probably would realise would be Recruits, which I hit almost straight away. And David loved that piece so much. He wanted it everywhere. So that was easy. Now the difficult one. Well, I think you probably have heard me say already that Dumbledore's Farewell was really, really hard because it was just finding something that was so deep and so sad and yet so had this sort of possibility of a good release in it, really, as they get rid of the dark mark, and a positiveness in it. And in the end, of course, I came up with something very simple. And I've listened to it the other day, and I still don't. Well, I sort of know why it works, but because it's going down and it's going up at the same time, and that sort of spreads and it gives that feeling of growth. But that was really hard. That took ages to get right. And they'd always say, "Can you dig deeper, Nick?" And the other one I can remember was "Flight Down the River" from Order of the Phoenix, which was my first big action piece of the movie, really. And I'm a bit of a folk musician, and it was a bit folky, I think. So we kind of tried to de-folky it. Then we got Alistair to beef it up for the recording session, and the beefing up didn't work. And in the end, it ended up being what I did, but there's quite a lot of working around it to try and give it that sort of action drama, which I suppose I wasn't so experienced in. So it did work in the end. Yeah.
I can remember that cue. I listened to hundreds of times in my, like, when I was 10 or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you already mentioned that John Williams scored 1, 2, 3, obviously, and then Patrick Doyle, Harry Potter 4.
Yeah.
And since Harry Potter 3, I think Alfonso Cuarón asked him to do something differently. And of course, because of the director's change and the composer's change in Harry Potter 4, that music is also different and brings in new themes. And but of course, Hedwig's theme is the only leitmotif that occurs in every Harry Potter score so far. I think it appeared 9 times in the 5th movie and 3 times in 6. Because it's the signature Harry Potter melody, but in the process of getting started with the concept of your scores, have you at some point considered bringing back some other old leitmotifs besides Hedwig's theme from the other movies?
David wasn't keen to do that. I think he wanted it to have its own specific stamp. I mean, we did realise and accept that Hedwig's theme must remain, although you were, of course, as you said, there was he say 9 times? I can't remember, in 5, and only 3 in 6, was because actually it's beginning to disappear as Voldemort takes over, and I didn't really notice much of it in 7A or 7B at all. And it was so any other, like, there's one.
The Quidditch.
Yeah, the Quidditch match. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. So I was taking that motif from John Williams.
Yeah, from the 3rd.
Yeah. But then turning it to a sort of piece of Stravinsky. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed doing that. Yeah, I think that's the only one where I specifically, because I wondered where to start. And I thought, well, there hasn't been any Quidditch for a bit, so I'm going to do that one. Yeah.
What was your strategy in scoring Voldemort? Of course, he just appears once in your 2 movies, if you don't count the pensive memories and the dream. I realized that you have scored this moment in the Ministry of Magic, where he appears with these low celli and basses glissandi, and with a little 4-note motive you already placed at the beginning of the dream, but with the dream of in Harry Potter 5. But the possession theme
Yeah.
sort of appears or also in Harry Potter 6 and
Yes, it does. Yeah.
yeah, and at least it's how it how I think about it. It's more like the possession theme is a theme for Voldemort, but more like the damage and pain that he causes. Is that
Yes. I think, yeah, it's true. I didn't really score Voldemort much. Yeah, because actually it was just a basy, ominous thing.
yeah,
Uh, and actually, there was a time when we were going to score the fight between Voldemort and Dumbledore,
yeah,
and then realised it was quite unnecessary because
yeah,
actually, with the sound effects, it was so effective. And
yeah,
then to come into the possession. So, possession itself is it's not just Voldemort, it's this kind of stirring undercurrent of this is not looking good, but there is a positive movement against it. So it does two things. It brings Voldemort in a sense, into Harry's head, but it also brings Harry's strength and his ability to get rid of Voldemort through love. So it has both things. And did you recognise any stylistic link to another composer with that one?
Any of the other Harry Potter composers?
No, sorry, no, just in general. Because it was inspired by Gorecki's Third Symphony. It's very interesting because it was about Auschwitz, and it's about you know the evil of that, and yet it's very beautiful, and it has possession. It has these very slow moving bases,
Yeah.
and building layers and layers and layers until you get this big sort of feeling. But Gorecki's symphony is really worth listening to, but it's quite long. Yeah, my everything in mind happens rather more quickly. Yeah, but there is, I suppose you could say there's a link in my mind between Hitler and Voldemort.
Yeah.
In fact,
That's interesting.
yeah.
Another motive you used in Harry Potter 6 is the one for Malfoy and his mission, I think it is. I think... What I noticed is that there's also this music.
Yeah.
Which, as far as I realized, it appears in moments where Harry and co are investigating on Malfoy. So is this intentionally linked? These two
Yes.
ideas?
Yeah. There's the fluty thing,
Yeah.
particularly. Yeah, that is very, very much to do with Malfoy, but also, you compare the two pieces of music. Actually, the first one is really quite sad because actually Malfoy is in the most horrible position, and it is quite sad. We want to feel what he's feeling in the film, not just say bad boy. Whereas the other one is about danger and investigation and what's going on, So and the Death Eaters, really, yeah.
Can you tell me something about the cues with the guitar in it, like when Ginny kissed Harry or Harry and Hermione? I really love how intimate they are and how fitting they are for the scene. So, did you play yourself guitar on that one, on these two?
When Harry kissed Ginny, originally it was done on the computer for pure speed, using a guitar sample, right? And I then recorded it on the guitar in Abbey Road. Now it depends, if you want to listen very closely, you will notice on the film it's a different sound from on the album. Because the album is the real guitar, but David so liked the sample, he kept it. So, you know, once he'd loved something, it wasn't any point in trying to change his mind. And you know, it works very, very well in the film. But on a CD, you can hear it's a real guitar, so that's got a plus. The other one is harp, actually. The Harry and Hermione is harp, and we had the most amazing harper called Isla, who, I mean, she cracked it first take. She just knew how to get that feeling. So it's interesting that the two are linked, of course, and one is obviously, in a way, glorious and rather happy about the kiss, and the other one is desolate and sad, but they are both very emotional and very simply emotional pieces. That's the intention, yeah.
There is also on the soundtrack album a cue called, or a track called Ginny, which appears when Harry visits the Burrow.
Yeah.
But then there is When Ginny Kissed Harry, so I was a little bit confused there, but I noticed that the Ginny cue also appears when the Burrow gets burnt down. So is this just a naming thing that Ginny, because Ginny is in the window, or are both motives for Ginny? Or is the first one more for the Burrow?
I think the first one is for the Burrow. So yeah, it is probably a bit confusing, that bit. Yeah, I'm trying to think very hard about it, actually. Yeah, but yeah, yeah. I think sometimes names can be confusing, and also when the Burrow gets burnt down, it's obviously a build to menace, something going wrong, and it's not like, because I think the Ginny kiss cue is the moment when it actually happens. Harry actually kisses the person he really loves for the first time.
Yeah, the next question might be a bit personal, so if you don't want to answer, then don't answer. Yeah. But why have you decided to not continue working on Harry Potter? I really wanted to hear what you would have done with the last two films as well. So was it like with Chris Columbus, a family was job discussion, or yeah?
So what happened was that during the whole business of starting Harry Potter, my daughter Rose was born, and it looked like there was a problem with her, the way she was growing up, and after much investigation, it was discovered she had what's called cerebellar hyperplasia, which is a rather small cerebellum. It meant that she's had to learn to talk, to walk, to pick up food, because your cerebellum is the bit that just reacts automatically, and for most people that just happens. You just get up and walk. Well, she could walk. She didn't walk till she was 8.5. So this put my wife under huge pressure, because there I was dashing off to Abbey Road, and I was working all the time, and there she was with Rose trying to work out what the hell was going on. And this is when Rose was pretty young. And so I think it got to the point, really, when we were finishing 6, that I said to David, I don't think I can do another one. And he was very lovely, and it was very sad. in a way, I'd have loved to have done it. I think it would have probably broken us. You know, we just needed. They needed me. They needed Daddy.
Yeah.
You know, and so regretfully, I didn't. If I'd done the last two, I think I probably would have found 7A much easier, because it was very much more the sort of my style of the personal and emotional relationship stuff going on, whereas 7B, I almost couldn't imagine doing it. I mean, I would have, if I had done it, I would have thought of saying, can we get John Williams back in to do 7B? And actually, you know, because Desplat did a really great job on with the big action sequences, you know, the dragon coming out of the Gringotts was amazing. And I almost couldn't imagine doing that. I mean, I probably would have done if I'd had to, but to find all that stuff when you've got family issues you need to sort out and look after.
Of course, yeah.
In the end, I very, very regretfully left. And, you know, we were good friends about it, even though we'd planned we'd do all four together. Yeah.
Family is the most important, so.
It is. People do understand that, yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't mind answering that question.
All right, thank you. What was your personal favorite cue that you've done?
It's probably Possession. Though Dumbledore's Farewell comes a second, close second. And then you know, I love the Quidditch match, particularly.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the scoring sessions? How long did it take to record the scores? And yeah, in general, I think you recorded a pick, not the symphony orchestra, but a pick from multiple orchestras. Or did I get that wrong?
Yes, it was. Basically, it was organised by my agent, who also ran session musicians as well. It was known as the Cool Orchestra, which originally started off as the Chamber Orchestra of London, but it wasn't exactly a chamber orchestra because there was over 100 players in it. And what happened? We did sort of look into the LSO thing because John Williams had done it, but there was touring issues and it just didn't fit. So what we did was we just found we were very lucky. We got the best musicians from the LSO, LPO, you know, all over England. Really, we had amazing musicians. So it was the great orchestra. It was a fabulous orchestra. The sessions were they took a long time, actually. With the Order of the Phoenix, because we were still finding our way, we recorded, I think it was at least a week, if not more, and then had a break. Might have even been 2 weeks. Oh, I can't remember. It was a lot of recording, long time. Then we had a break because I needed to write some more stuff. I haven't quite finished. So I was doing that, and I was staying up at Abbey Road at the time, and Peter Cobbin, who was the man who did the engineering and mixing, who was really, you couldn't have asked for anybody better. He was very experienced, and he'd heard my temp tracks, you know, my electronic versions, mock-ups with the mixes, and he said, "Look, Nick, I'm trying to mix this, and actually, what's coming up isn't as good, in my mind, as what you did in the first place." And the reason being, there was we had tried to beef some things up a bit, and make them sound big Hollywood, and actually it wasn't working, because actually the sort of frailer, gentler style that I used was working much better. So we did have to, after that break, we did go back and re-record some of the pieces again. Not all of them, but we needed to get stuff right so that Peter could mix. He was using my originals as a sort of template for how it should go, which was amazing. So that was on the first one. We were learning on that really, but we still got there. And they were no one was saying, "Oh gosh, you're taking too long." I think it was expected. On a movie that side, you might take 3 or 4 weeks to get the whole thing down. One of the reasons it also took a long time was that we did the music in stems. So we would record probably the strings first, as they would be the basis of everything that happened. And then we would put in brass, woodwind, percussion. A choir, of course, you would have recorded separately anyway. And so every session would be, once we'd been done it a couple of times and got the feeling of it, then the session would be getting the strings right and then getting them. So it would take a long time. And what's amazing about the musicians and the conductor and all concerned is you don't know when you listen to the performances that they aren't just all performing at one time, which is pretty amazing, because somehow the whole thing sounds so musical. You just thought it might get a bit laboured, but it doesn't. So that was quite a tricky one. The reason, of course, for doing the stems was so we could mix afterwards.
Yeah.
And David really liked to be able to have a hands-on with the mix. He loved to be in there, and it was part of the process. And in the second film, there wasn't that business of, we didn't have to do remixing. We'd sorted it out by then. How I worked and how Peter worked. So that was much more me just catching up. I had playing more catch up in the second one.
A professional mixing engineer asking you how you mixed it is like.
Well, it was or he was
interesting.
He was sort of listening to the way the music was mixed, and I think it was something I really worked on in my profession throughout my professional life. I was so fussy about mixes, really fussy.
I would say that's a rewarding compliment.
Yeah, it was rather. Yes, it was very. I was thinking, and then there was a blooming problem. But still, no, it was quite a compliment actually. I've really liked Peter ever since. Yeah. What's going on? Another thing. Yeah.
So how often would you and David Yates meet in the time of doing the films?
Actually meeting, I think in the first one we met quite a lot more. Difficult to say how often. Sometimes it'd be quite a few times, maybe a couple of times a week. Sometimes there wouldn't be. Sometimes there'd be a lot of phone calls. The thing is, what I discovered, because I'd always had, David to hand, that we would always work very closely, but with something of this scale, he was needed everywhere. So, if I went up to London to have a meeting, sometimes I'd have to wait quite a bit because he would be dealing with, something to do with the effects or whatever, and then we'd have a meeting. So, a lot was done over the phone. Obviously, the internet was not used at all. Yeah. So none of the films came over the internet. They were all delivered by people on motorbikes.
and put into a safe.
Into a safe, yeah, you know that story, yes. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I think there would always be, it'd always come back. There would always be a discussion, but it may well be over the phone rather than in person. And often I'd go up and see the rushes and be with Mark as well, the editor, and just have a look at stuff that's going on there, which is very inspiring. Yeah.
And that would look like your working day would look like you go into your, I think it's a shed.
Yes, I'm in my shed now.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And then you would put the drives, I think it's on USB drives or something like that, SSDs, out of the safe and connect it to your computer. And only then you could work to picture.
Yeah.
And if you would decide, okay, now I move on to that cue that is a completely different reel, you would have to switch again. And
it was quite time consuming. Yes, it was there. It did take a while, and everything was much slower then. I mean, if I'd had the gear I had now, I mean, I'd been using Spitfire, since just after I finished Potter, and the sounds are so amazing compared to what I was using. But I was using the best sounds of the time, but they were, they sounded very plastic, not very realistic. And now I've got a Mac Mini that will do what the two old computers did, but 4 times faster. There was all sorts of things like, it would take 15 minutes for something to load up sometimes. And there was the point where there was the Umbridge theme, which was, like I said, was very easy to write. In the end, there was a lot of, I must have been where it was in the film, there was a lot of re-edits of the Umbridge theme. It was the one where she walks through the school, waving a wand and stopping people doing naughty things, and measuring Flitwick, And for some reason, it just kept changing. I think about 15 times, and every time it came back, I'd have to load it up again and do it. But that was the business, really. That's how it worked. We still got there in time, and it still really worked. Yeah. We did develop a phase called noodling. We tried not to noodle too much.
I think you also mentioned on the podcast that the release of Harry Potter 6 was delayed, and that caused a lot of noodling in the editing.
Yes, yes, it did. I mean, probably in the end for the best, but at the time, I felt like I'd lost control of my score. And that's the point at which the jazz piece went. I think when people have a chance to reflect, then they start wondering, was that quite right, and was that quite right? But it is, and I thought at the time that's such a shame, and now it's the best score I've ever done. That one. So their noodling actually improved things. Damn it.
Was this also the point where you realized that the Noctem scene was gone from the film?
What point?
The screening after the long delay.
Yeah. No, in Noctem went much earlier than that.
Okay.
Yeah. No, it was more or less went out in the first couple of months I was working on it. So, yeah, it was definitely early on. I think it certainly was not right at the end of the process. But I must have said, but what do we do now? But I have a feeling what happened was that it went sort of in the middle, and then by then we decided it was really good using that theme, so we stuck with it, and that's how it developed. It's one of the best outtakes, as it were, or worst. I think that it was a matter of taking that out or making the bit with the Inferi and the fire shorter, which it couldn't have been, or speeding up the Dumbledore Malfoy scene, which actually builds really well. So it was and then partly also it was knocked out so you could see the Death Eaters coming through the vanishing cabinet, which was, you sort of needed that really. So I think they were going for stacking up the worry and the fear of what's going to happen with the audience rather than the sadness that was going to happen.
Have you read the screenplay and decided musical decisions while reading the screenplay, or was it just after the screenplay was finished?
Interesting question. I think the way I work tends to mean that reading the screenplay has definitely an effect, but it's sort of accumulative. So I read the screenplays, for both films, and I think while I was reading them, I imagined all sorts of things, and then in a way I didn't note them down, so I promptly forgot them really. But probably then they might well have affected what I did. I think it probably did. I think I could honestly say that. But how, I wouldn't be able to explain to you. I'm sorry, I can't give you. I thought that in bar 56, I'm in the perfect note. And not that detailed, it's more of a general feeling.
How much of music was described in the screenplay? Because sometimes it happens that music is described in the screenplay, and of course with the deleted scene with Noctem, was that in the screenplay as well, that the choir is singing there, or was this just added after the screenplay and then taken out?
I think it was in the screenplay. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. No, it's just, but then that's the sort of thing that happens because the screenplay's there, and then then you make the film, then you cut it, and then some bits of the screenplay go too. So no doubt, the screenwriter is also gnashing his teeth a bit sometimes. My favourite scene's gone, but to be fair, my favourite scene in the book number 5 was when Harry trashes Dumbledore's office at the end.
Yeah.
And they left that out.
Yeah.
And I think I would have liked it in, but they probably have had to have made 2 films. In fact, it's the longest book. It's 5.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they didn't. It wasn't until they got to 7 that they realised they should probably make 2 films.
Yeah. But I think it's totally amazing that the 5th book is the longest, but I think the movie is the 2nd shortest or something like that. And for that fact, I think they really included a lot compared to like other films, Harry Potter films, I think. But the Dumbledore scene, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's true, but they combined the fireworks, which I thought was very clever, because there was originally 2 fireworks scenes in the book, and then they
swamp. Yeah.
So they did quite a bit of that sort of stuff. So that was, it's great. No, I think it was a very good job, to be honest, and I'm very proud to be part of it, because I think when it comes to making something from a book, and such a good book, or good books as Harry Potter, and making it so successfully, and sticking with the story, I think it was quite a business, really. It did work. I'm interested to see what Netflix come up with.
So, last question. if you could give one piece of advice to an aspiring film composer that is just starting out in his career, what would it be?
Learn to write fast. I'd also say have a broad attitude to music, so you can write more than one style.